All right, chapter 12. We try to have independent expressions, except that it is not distance that has held the stars in unchanging position. If occasional abrupt change of position has been seen at the distance of the stars, and it is implied that the not enormously distant stars are about equally far away from this Earth, or some would be greatly particularized, and that this Earth does not move in an orbit, or stars would be seasonally particularized, but would not be if the stars in one composition revolve. Also, if this Earth be relatively close to all stars, if many changes of magnitude and of appearance and disappearance have been seen at the distance of the stars, and if in the revolutions of the stars they do not swirl in displacements as bewildering as a blizzard of luminous snowflakes, and if no state of interrepulsion can be thought of, especially as many stars merge into others, this composition is a substantial concave formation or a shell-like enclosure in which stars are points. It was a long sentence. So many of the expressions in the preceding chapter imply others or all others. However, we have tried to have independent expressions. Of course, we realize that the supposed difference between inductive and deductive reasoning is a false demarcation. Nevertheless, we feel that deductions piled upon other deductions are only architecture, and a great deal in this book expresses the notion that architecture should be kept in its own place. Our general expression is not that there should be no architecture and no mathematics in astronomy or neo-astronomy, not that there should be no poetry in biology, no chemistry in physiology, psychology? Might be psychophysiology, I don't know. But that pure architecture or pure mathematics, biology, chemistry has its own field, even though each is inextricably bound up with all the other aspects of being. So, of course, the very thing that we object to in its extreme manifestations is essential to us in some degree, and the deductive is findable somewhere in every one of our inductions, and we are not insensible to what we think is the gracefulness of some of the converging lines of our own constructions. We are not revolting against aspects, but against emphasis and intrusions. Yeah. The first part of our work is what we consider neo-astronomic. And now, to show that we have no rabidity against the mathematical except when overemphasized or misapplied, our language is that all expressions so far developed are to us about 50% acceptability. A far greater attempted independence is coming, a second part of this work, considering phenomena so different that, if we term the first part of our explorations neo-astronomic, even some other term by which to designate the field of the second part will have to be thought of, and the word extrageographic seems best for it. These two fields are at least temporary conclusions be the same. We shall be impressed in spite of all our cynicisms as to agreements. Neo-astronomy. This supposed solar system, an egg-like organism that is shelled away from external light and life, the central and stationary Earth, its nucleus, around it a revolving shell in which the stars are pores, or functioning channels through some of which spray irradiating fountains said to be meteoric, but perhaps electric, in which the nebula are translucent patches, and in which the many dark parts are areas of opaque structural substance, and that the stars are not trillions nor even millions of miles away, with proportional reductions of all internal distances, so that the planets are not millions nor even hundreds of thousands of miles away. We conceive of the variability of the stars and the nebula in terms of the incidence of external light upon a revolving shell and fluctuating passage through light admitting points and parts. We conceive of all things being rhythmic. So, if stars be pores in a substance, that matrix must be subject to some changes, which may be of different periodicities in different regions. There may be local vortices in the most rigid substance, and so stars or pores might revolve around one another, but our tendency is to think that if light companions there be to some stars, they are reflections of light passing through channels upon surrounding substance, flickering from one position to another in the small undulations of this environment. So there may be other displacements, differences of magnitude, new openings and closings in a substance that is not absolutely rigid. So proper motion might be accounted for, but my own preference is to think as to such stars as 1830 Groom Bridge and Barnard's runaway star, that they are planets. Also, that some of the comets, especially the tailless comets, some of which have been seen to obscure stars, so that evidently they are not wisps of highly attenuated matter, are planets, all of them not conventionally recognized as planets because of eccentricity and remoteness from the ecliptic. Two departures, however, that many of the minor planets make to great degree. If some of these bodies be planets, the irregularities of some of them are consistent with the irregularities of Jupiter's satellites. I suggest that a combination of the Ptolemaic and the Tychonic doctrines is in good accord with all the phenomena that we have considered and with all planetary motions that we have had no occasion to pay much attention to, that the sun, carrying Mercury and Venus with him, revolves at a distance of a few thousand miles, or a few tens of thousand miles, in a rising and falling spiral around this virtually but not absolutely stationary Earth, which, according to modern investigations, is more top-shaped than spherical, moon a few thousand miles away, revolving around this nucleus, and the exterior planets not only revolving around this whole central arrangement, but approaching and receding in loops also quite as they seem to the remotest of them preposterously near according to conventional determinations. So all the phenomena of the skies may be explained, but all were explained in another way by Copernicus, in another way by Ptolemy, and in still another way by Tycho Brahe. One supposes that there are other ways, if there be a distant object, and if one school of wise men can by their reasoning process excellently demonstrate that it is a tree, another school positively determined that it is a house, and other investigators of the highest authoritativeness variously find and prove that it is a cloud, or a buffalo, or a geranium. Why then their reasoning processes may be admired but not trusted. Right at the heart of our opposition and right at the heart of our own expressions is the fatality that there is no reasoning, no logic, no explanation resembling the illusions in the vainglories of common suppositions. There is only the process of correlating to or organizing or systematizing around something that is arbitrarily taken for a base or a dominant doctrine or a major premise. The process of assimilating with something else, making agreement with something else, or interpreting in terms of something else, which supposed base is never itself final, but was originally an assimilation with still something else. I typify the result of all examinations of all principles or laws or dominant thought, scientific, philosophic, or theologic, in what we find in examining the pronouncement that motion follows the least resistance. That motion follows least resistance. How are we to identify least resistance if motion follows it? Then motion goes where motion goes. If nothing can be positively distinguished from anything else, there can be no positive logic, which is attempted positive distinguishment. Consider the popular base that capital is tyranny and almost utmost wickedness, and that labor is pure and idealistic. But one's labor is one's capital, and capital that is not working is in no sense implicated in this conflict. Nevertheless, we now give up our early suspicion that our whole existence is a leper of the skies, quaking and cringing through space, having the isolation that astronomers suppose because other celestial forms of being fly from infection. that, if shelled away from external light and life, it is so surrounded and so protected in the same cause and functioning as that of similarly encompassed forms subsidiary to it that our existence is super embryonic. Darkness of light, of darkness of night, and of lives and of thoughts, super uterine entombment, blackness of the unborn, quasi illumined periodically by the little sun, which is not light but less dark. Then we think of an organism that needs no base and needs nothing of finality nor of special guidance to any part local to it, because all parts partake of the predetermined development of the whole. Consequently, our spleens subside, and our frequently unmannerly derisions are hushed by recognitions that all organizations of thought must be baseless in themselves, and of course be not final, or they could not change, and must bear within themselves those elements that will in time destroy them, that seeming solidities that pass away in phantom successions are functionaries relatively to their periods and express the passage from phase to phase of all things embryonic. So it is that one who searches for fundamentals comes to bifurcations, never to a base, only to a quandary. In our field, let there be any acceptable finding. It indicates that the earth moves around the sun, just as truly it indicates that the sun moves around the earth. What is it that determines which will be accepted? Hypnotically blinding the faithful to their other aspects, or shit. Hypnotically blinding the faithful to their other aspect, or our own expression is upon development as serial reactions to successive dominance. Let the dominant spirit of an era require that this earth be remote and isolated. Keplerism will support it. Let the dominant change to a spirit of expansion, which would be impossible under such remoteness and isolation. Keplerism will support, or will not especially oppose, the new dominant. This is the essential process of embryonic growth by which the same protoplasmic substance responds differently in different phases. But I do not think that all data are so plastic. There are some that will not assimilate with a prevailing doctrine. They can have no effect upon an arbitrary system of thought or a system subconsciously induced in its time of dominance. They will simply be disregarded. We have reached our catalog of the sights and the sounds, to which all that we have so far considered is merely introductory. For them, there are either no conventional explanations or poor insufficiencies half-heartedly offered. Our data are glimpses of an epoch that is approaching with faraway explosions. It is vibrating on its edges with the tread of distant space armies. Already it has pictured in the sky visions that signify new excitements, even now lapping over into the affairs of a self-disgusted, played-out hermitage. We assemble the data. Unhappily, we shall be unable to resist the temptation to reason and theorize. May super embryology have mercy upon our own syllogisms. We consider that we are entitled to at least 13 pages of gross and stupid errors. After that, we shall have to explain.